Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah, amma ba'd. Khair, we move on to issue number 3, which is what if your utensil or the vessel that you're using has been used by an animal, or actually, yeah, let's just leave it at that, has been used by an animal, okay? So for example, you have a tub of water that you have outside of your house, you live on a farm, and you have your sheep that come and drink from this water. There's a shortage of water in the city, you need to make wudu, and this is the only water you find, but your sheep have been drinking from that water. Can we use that water to purify ourselves or not? Can we use that water to purify ourselves or not? So that is the scenario that is being painted over here, okay? So now we have opinion number 1, which is the opinion of the Maliki madhab, which is the opinion of the Maliki madhab. So this is the main opinion. There's another opinion that's coming up, but this is the main one. And that is, water left over by all animals is pure, and it does not matter what kind of animal it is. So this includes what? A dog and a pig, right? All animals are included in this. So the water that is used by them is pure. This is the opinion of the main opinion of the Maliki madhab. Opinion number 2. This is another narration of the Maliki madhab, which is all water left by animals is pure with the exception of pigs. With the exception of pigs. So they didn't consider the dogs impure, but they considered the pigs. They considered the pigs impure. Okay. Opinion number 3. This is the Shafi'i madhab. The Shafi'i madhab. Water left by all animals is purifying water, with the exception of the pig and the dog. The pig and the dog. Okay, this is the Shafi'i madhab now. Okay. Opinion number 4. This is the opinion of the Hanbali madhab. The opinion of the Hanbali madhab. And the ruling follows the ruling of their meat. So whatever the ruling of their meat is, then it'll take the ruling of the water as well. So if that animal is permissible to slaughter and eat, then you can use that water. If that animal is not permissible to slaughter and eat, then you cannot use that water. So now, how is this opinion different from the Shafi'i madhab? Who can explain this to me? How is this opinion different from the Shafi'i madhab? Yeah. So Imam Shafi'i, he said it is all animals except for pigs and dogs. Imam Ahmad is saying that it is only the animals that you're allowed to sacrifice and eat. Furqan, you had your hand up first, and it went down all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think I just lost my train of thought.
You just lost your train of thought? Go ahead.
Could be animals that hunt on other animals, like carnivorous animals that we are not supposed to eat, but if they're thirsty, like for instance, if you're in a jungle and there's a puddle of water.
Fantastic.
And a lion comes and drinks from the water.
Fantastic.
Any other animals.
Correct. So that is what it is being referred to. Is that a lot of people think that pigs and dogs are the only animals Muslims can't eat. But in fact, when you study the book of food, you will come to see that there's several categories of food, of animals that we're not allowed to eat whatsoever. So number 1 are animals that have fangs and use those fangs to attack their prey. Generally they're called carnivorous animals, yet the Prophet ﷺ was very specific in this issue. Number 2, birds that have claws, the Prophet ﷺ forbade from eating those. Number 3, animals that the Prophet ﷺ has commanded to kill, right? Those animals, you're not allowed to sacrifice and eat them, right?
But isn't that contradicting to the concept of like a cat? Because we say a cat is a pure animal.
Right.
And if you have a pet cat,
right,
and she goes and drinks from the bathtub water,
right,
you're using it for wudu,
right,
doesn't that contradict with the last scenario?
Sorry, I didn't understand why.
Like we can't slaughter a cat and we can't eat a cat.
Right.
But
but on what basis though? On what basis?
On using that water.
No, I understand though, but why do you think cats are not permissible to eat?
Because being carnivores.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
okay. Right.
Days,
so this is where we'll differentiate between an animal that is domesticated versus an animal that is not domesticated. Okay. An animal that is domesticated no longer uses its fangs to attack. correct? You're feeding the animal. I mean, unless you buy like rats and like give that to your animal. I don't know if people still do that or not, but nowadays you just give them like cat food, right? Whereas the non-domesticated animal, that's the animal that's going to go out and attack and use its fangs to attack. And that's where you would differentiate. Now, this wouldn't change the ruling that just because you have a domesticated animal doesn't mean that you can now slaughter the cat. But that's how the scholars would differentiate between would it infect the water with impurity or not.
And the question for the first ruling, like for the first scenario, you said like it's permissible to use the water even if a dog or a pig has drank from that water.
Yes.
But isn't it said that like the dog's saliva isn't?
Well, that's issue number 4 that we're coming to. So on issue number 3, that's issue number 4. Nafis, what were you going to say? It's okay. Furqan?
I'm sorry, because how come like Maliki has 2 different views?
Okay, fantastic. So now, I guess I should have explained this in the beginning. When we talk about the different madhahib, you have the founder of the madhab. And he's like the one that established the principles of the madhab. Now the implementation of those principles, that changed over time. Some of the students came, other great scholars came, and they understood those principles in a different light and introduced a new opinion into the madhab. So that is why as a school evolves, there will be more opinions that come into play. So that is why I gave that disclaimer that, hey, when I mention these names, I'm not talking about the founder of the school, I'm talking about the school of thought altogether. So that is why one school of thought can have multiple opinions.
So one ruling came from one side and the other ruling came from the other within the school.
Within the school of thought, exactly. Okay. Now, this is how it's understood with Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad, and Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Shafi'i, he has a different understanding of this issue because he actually went through 2 different schools, his school in Iraq and his school in Egypt. So you have the old Shafi'i opinion and new Shafi'i opinion. Now that is a different subject. So when you find, Imam Shafi'i's first opinion, Imam Shafi'i's second opinion, it's actually very possible that the Imam himself had these 2 different opinions because he went through a great transformation himself. But that's only particular to Imam Shafi'i. The rest of the madhahib, the opinions of the founders were generally one and consistent. Okay, so we're just talking about the schools of thought over here. So that was opinion number 4, which was the Hanbali madhab, that said animals that you're allowed to slaughter and eat, their water is pure. Animals that you're not allowed to slaughter and eat, their water is not pure. Let's have a discussion on this. Where are we leaning towards this issue as a class? How do we feel? So we're talking about if an animal touches a still body of water that is relatively small, it's not very big, how do we feel about that body of water as a class? Shafi'i opinion? So everything except for pigs and dogs.
By touches you mean drink from it?
Yeah, by the drinks from it, yes.
Like Shafi'i or Hanbali opinion, but eventually you'll go back to the first ruling regarding the taste, the odor, and the smell. So after that you'll go back to that ruling and say, okay, does it have a taste, does it have an odor, or smell altered in any way?
Okay.
I feel like it'll trickle down just like the first scenario.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Say the first opinion, because
oh man, that's bold, mashallah. Okay, go ahead.
Dog and pig are najas by their nature, so the fact that they touch the water doesn't change the purity of the water, because the water it's still water, so it's still pure.
Okay.
The dog saliva is najis.
That's what I was
told. Right.
So I'd say it's not enough to change. If you're still calling it water, then it's still water.
Right. So I think this is very important to understand the principles of fiqh. So that principle what are you going to say something, Nafis?
Does Maliki school look at the saliva of dog najis or?
No, they consider it pure. That's
why they said everything is.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
That's the ruling behind the first.
That is the ruling behind the first. And that's why even their second one, they only made the pig haram. Okay. They didn't make the dog haram. Okay. So now it's very important to understand the following. Understand the principles of fiqh when you learn fiqh. Don't focus on the technicalities of who said what opinion, but understand the principles behind them. So the principle that you want to understand over here is that the default ruling on everything is that it is pure until you prove the impurity. It is pure until you prove the impurity. So now, if we are going to say that X, Y, and Z animal's saliva is impure, we need to bring a proof for that. We can't just make an empty claim without having an ayah from the Quran, without having a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, without having a consensus amongst the companions or something of that nature. So that is why understanding that principle of things are pure until they're proven to be impure is very relevant over here. So now, I think as general knowledge, we will all agree that it is known that the saliva of the dog is considered impure. As a general knowledge, this is understood. Pig, I mean, we have this, hate towards pigs. Like, subhanAllah, our kids have a drawing of a pig, on their shirt. They're like, that shirt is haram. You can't wear that. So that natural aversion is there. Sometimes it gets a bit excessive, but even the default ruling of the pig is that it is impure. Like literally, it's one of the animals in the Quran that has been explicitly mentioned time and time again due to its impurity. So those two I can understand. But for everything else, to the best of my knowledge, we have not been told that their saliva is impure or that they're in an inherent state of impurity. So I like what Rizwan was saying, and I like what Furqan was saying, that number one is that even if an animal was to drink from it, there has to be like a large amount of saliva washed back into this. Right? And most of the times it's going to be a small amount. And then going back to what Furqan was saying, then you need to look at, did the characteristics of the water change? Did the characteristics of the water change? And was it actual impurity or not? Was it actual impurity or not? That's why all of these issues, they're all tied in together. They're building up one upon another. So if we have now proven that the pig and the dog, their saliva is impure, then even if it is mixed into the water, until the characteristics change, that water is still going to be pure, because we just covered that in the first two issues. Now, if it's an animal that its saliva is pure, this goes back to issue number 2, where pure substance that doesn't change the characteristics of the water, it remains upon its pure state. It remains upon its pure state. So that is why, looking at these various opinions, I want you to understand the opinions where they are coming from. But don't be fixated on the opinions themselves. Be fixated on the understanding. How do I understand this issue? So the way we understand this issue now is we need to prove that the saliva of the animal that drank from this water is impure if we're going to give it a ruling. If it is not impure, then as long as the characteristics of the water are still there, it is still considered water and is pure to use. It is still considered water and is pure to use. Now, scholars did go into a discussion of how to rebuke one another and dispute one another, but we're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into that. So let us move into issue number 4. Issue number 4 is, if a dog uses one of your utensils and its saliva gets onto it, so you have a dog, it drinks from your bucket and there's slobber all over the bucket. Can you use that bucket, or does it have to be washed? Does it have to be washed? What is this discussion revolving around? It is the hadith found in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ said, the purification of the utensil belonging to any of you after it is licked by a dog lies in washing it 7 times using sand or soil for the first time. Using sand or soil for the first time. There are different versions of this hadith that talk about when the sand or soil should be used. The general understanding is that it has to be washed 7 times, where one of them has to be with sand or with soil. Where one of them has to be with sand or soil. So that is where this discussion is coming up from. That is where this discussion is coming up from. So now, we get to opinion number 1. This is the Shafi'i madhab and the Hanbali madhab. You cannot use it until the dirt is used to clean the saliva. You cannot use it until the soil or the sand is used to clean the saliva. Okay? That's opinion number 1. That is the Shafi'i and Hanbali opinion. That you can only use it after the soil has been used to eliminate the saliva. Opinion number 2 is another group from amongst the Hanabila and some of the Hanafis say that you can use whatever will purify it. Whatever will purify it. So for example, you have a choice between using soil and you have a choice between using, a brand name dishwashing detergent. Do you have to use soil, or can we use this dishwashing detergent that will do the job as well? That's what they're saying over here, that you can use the dishwashing detergent. Whereas the first opinion, only soil and sand. Only soil and sand. And then opinion number 3, this is the stronger opinion amongst the Shafi'i madhab, whereas use dirt, but if you cannot find dirt, then you can use anything else that will purify it. So dirt is preferred, but whatever you find to purify it after can be used. Whatever can be used to purify it besides dirt can be used, but only if you don't find dirt, only if you don't find the soil, only if you don't find the soil. Now, let's just briefly discuss the issue of dogs themselves. So now, we live in a society where dogs are everywhere. You know, if you walk in a park, it's almost unavoidable to get touched by them because they're running around everywhere. So now, if you get touched by a dog, we're not talking about the mouth, we're not talking about saliva. In this situation, is there any harm in you praying right after? The answer is no. That there's no harm in you praying right after, even if there was like one of his hair or his fur was to get onto you. It doesn't make your clothes impure. It's just something that you just take off and you wipe away. And if you don't even notice it, it won't nullify your salah. So being touched by a dog doesn't break your wudu, doesn't make your clothes impure. Now, the saliva of the dog, this is where the difference of opinion lies. This is where the difference of opinion lies. The vast majority of scholars, they did hold it to be impure. So the Hanbali school, the Shafi'i school, the Hanafi school, they did hold it to be impure. And they said that it needs to be washed off. It needs to be washed off. Now, what's important to understand in this context is that there was no concept of there was no concept of dishwashing detergent. There was no concept of heavy like chemical induced soap that'll like bleach your clothes and stuff like that. That is why they used soil and dirt as purifying, because that is what used to purify the substances. So they'd use that to kill off the bacteria, and then they would wash it with water, and then they would wash it with water. Now, that is what the letter of the law states. The letter of the law states, use sand, use soil. But is the emphasis of the law on the letter of the law, or is it on the spirit of the law? That as long as it gets purified, it doesn't matter what you use to purify it. In this situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The spirit of the law takes precedence over here. That whatever can be used to eliminate the saliva of the dog can be used. Whether it's soap, whether it is some sort of chemical, some sort of bleach, whatever you want to use, that is perfectly fine. Go ahead.
So we know water is a purifier.
Yes.
If we just use water, will that be enough?
In this situation, no. The Prophet ﷺ told us to take an extra step. Had water been enough, he would have said, wash it with water alone. But he said, wash it 7 times, and one of them with soil or sand. So that extra step needs to be taken. That extra step needs to be taken. Now, there was something interesting I was going to bring over here. So now, is hunting with dogs permissible? Can we use a dog to hunt for food? What do you guys think?
According to one madhab.
Sorry?
According to one madhab.
According to one madhab. I'm asking what you guys think. Individually, what do you understand? Can you use a dog to hunt?
Yes. Yes.
Anyone feel no, you can't use a dog to hunt? No one? Okay, good. So now, what I want us to think about is how do we reconcile the issue of washing the utensil that the dog has licked and using the animal that the dog has hunted for you. So the utensil, we just said, you have to wash it 7 times, one of them with sand or dirt. Then what do you do with the animal?
Cook it, right?
You cook it.
And you have to clean it before
You're not gonna eat it raw.
You're not going to eat it raw.
not with dishwashing soap or something. Like
You're not going to put dishwashing soap on it.
With the process of like slaughtering the animal already cleaned it up, because once you hunted the animal down, the dog hunted the animal down, you slaughtered it.
All right.
And with the process of slaughtering that and processing that meat, would clean it up already.
So the slaughtering purifies the animal. That is correct. But it doesn't purify the issue of the saliva of the dog. And this is where we get to the issue of the spirit of the law. So what this brother said is very accurate. Inshallah, none of us eat raw meat, right? You don't eat raw meat. So you're going to wash the meat first, and then you cook it. So the remaining bacteria, it gets cooked off. It gets cooked off, right? And this is where the spirit of the law needs to be understood. That the Prophet ﷺ didn't say for the hunting dog, you need to wash that, you need to put that animal in soil or sand first, and then wash it, and then cook it. He didn't tell us to do that because the cooking part of it would kill the bacteria already. And that is where the understanding of the spirit of the law can come into play, that you're not required to purify your clothes with soil and sand and utensils with soil and sand if you found something else that can do the job.
So you said it's allowed, it's permissible to like hunt with the dog, but
Yes.
since childhood I have been hearing that like you should not keep dog as a pet because angels don't come to that house. Is that
Correct.
correct?
That is correct.
So like what's the ruling on that scenario?
Fantastic. So now when we actually discuss this this comes under the chapter of food and clothing, interestingly enough. But there's 3 types of dogs that you're allowed to keep. So number 1 is the guard dog. That's the dog that guards the house. For example, before we had alarm systems, you're afraid of a burglar. What do? You're allowed having a guard dog. That's perfectly fine. Number 2 is the hunting dog. That is the dog that will go out and hunt birds for you predominantly. And then number 3 is a dog that has another purpose to it that is justified by the Shari'ah. So now this seems very vague, but what the Shari'ah is intending by it is the dog that is perhaps for a blind person, right? So he needs a dog to walk with him. Or you're on a farm and the dog is able to do a job that you physically can't do, right? So in that situation, you could use the dog. So the first two are very clear, the guard dog and the hunting dog. And the third, you look at the use and benefit of the dog. So in those 3 circumstances, it is permissible to keep the dog in the house. However, even in those circumstances, the scholars did recommend if you are able to build a shed for it outside of the house, that is more preferable for it. However, in the case that it's not permissible, then it is permissible to keep it inside the house.
Okay.
Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, so with that we've covered the first 2 sections of our discussions of fiqh. We've covered the first 2 sections of the sections of fiqh. Now we get into the 3rd section. And that 3rd section is, what time is the adhan? 8:48?
8:50.
Okay, so let's just get into the introduction of this and then we'll conclude. The next section we're going to be discussing is purifying yourself from physical impurity. Purifying yourself from physical impurity. Now, there are 2 types of purifications from physical impurity that we need to understand. The first type is what we call taharatun min al-hadath. Taharatun min al-hadath. And this is when an event takes place in the body that will require purification. An event takes place in the body that will require purification. This can be passing gas. This can be defecation. This can be urination. This can be the fluid that comes out of the private parts. This would be called taharatun min al-hadath. Okay? So that is something happens in the body, then a physical purification is required. A second type of purification that is understood over here is taharatun min al-khubuth. Taharatun min al-khubuth. And this is if you were to get impurity on your clothes itself. So for example, urine drops onto your clothes. Okay, what happens in that situation? Or you're slaughtering an animal and with one of the opinions that blood is impure, that blood comes onto your clothes. What do you do with that blood? So these are the 2 scenarios that we're looking at. So taharatun min al-hadath is an event that happens in the body that requires purification. Taharatun min al-khubuth is an external impurity that gets onto you. It's an external impurity that gets onto you. An external impurity that gets onto you. Okay? Now, a general understanding of this chapter is that the Prophet ﷺ told Fatima radiallahu anha, purify yourself, make ghusl, and then pray. Purify yourself, make ghusl, and pray. So this shows that it is a physical purification process that is required. A physical purification process that is required. So now, starting from our next halaqah, what we'll actually go into is what are the etiquettes of using the bathroom. The Prophet ﷺ gave us very strict conditions on how to use the bathroom. We'll be discussing those. What I want to conclude the halaqah with is, as Muslims, is this something that we should shy away from? Is this something that we should feel embarrassed about? Not at all. And this is something that's very important to understand, that our religion is the only religion that I know of, to the best of my knowledge, that is this strict on this purification process. Right? We're very, very strict in terms of our purification process. And this is something that Muslims, we should be proud of. This is a source of izzah, that cleanliness is such an important component of our faith. That Allah wants us to be spiritually clean and physically clean at the same time. Now to conclude with a nice story, You know, the people of the past, they came and they taunted some of the Sahaba. They said that, look, your way of life now is so backwards that he's even taught you, you know, how to wash yourselves when you go to the bathroom. And the person that this happened to was Salman al-Farsi radiallahu anhu. Salman al-Farsi radiallahu anhu, he said, not only did he teach us not to, you know, face the Qibla, not only did he teach us to wash ourselves and clean ourselves, but he also taught us the following. Meaning that what you're using to embarrass me with is actually a source of fakhr, is a source of pride for me. And as Muslims, that's what we need to do. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us to purify ourselves and taught us to be noble, and this is something that we should be proud of. So we should never feel ashamed of having to make wudu in a bathroom or making wudu in a park or anything like that. Since when do we feel ashamed of, you know, washing or of being clean? No one ever says, you know, I feel bad because I took too many showers. Right? People should feel bad when they don't take showers. Right? And I'll just give you, conclude on one last funny story. So a couple of months back, I did something called a juice detox, where you buy particular sets of juice, and that's all you drink for 3 days. And this was just an experiment to see how my body reacted to it, and you know, what effect it would have on my weight loss and weight gain situation, and so on and so forth. So I was doing a lot of research on this, and I came across this one guy in BC who did something similar, but he did his detox with coconut water. So all he would drink is coconut water. So now day and night, this guy's drinking coconut water. The effect it's having on his bowels though, is he's having like almost like diarrhea-like symptoms every time he's going to the bathroom, because all he's drinking is coconut water. So he's like, day 3, you know, I've gone to the bathroom like 8 times today, and I've been using toilet paper so much that it's starting to burn that part of my body. So I can't go to the bathroom anymore. And I was reading this like 2 years after he did this experiment. I genuinely wanted to tell him, hey, you know what would make this easier? Use water. You don't have to use toilet paper. And this is like the simplicity and the beauty of our deen, that people don't know these simple concepts, that when you go to the bathroom, you don't have to just use toilet paper. You can use water. Not only is it more purifying, but it's a lot easier on your body as well. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you've had to use like toilet paper like 2 or 3 days in a row. It's a terrifying experience. It burns your skin. Like, it causes rashes and stuff. So again, this is a part of the beauty of our deen that we should be proud of. And that's the note I will conclude on. Jazakumullah khairan for your attention. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.